Looking to get into IT but don't know where to start? Well, in this episode, I provide my own personal roadmap to launch a career in network engineering if I was going to start today. So if you want to know where to start and how to study, keep listening.
Do you want a career in cybersecurity? Are you unsure how to start? Curious what it means to be a cybersecurity professional? This is the Cyber Job Hacks Podcast with Dr. Jeff Colburn. He's a 30-year industry professional and the founder of Team Caveo, a company that specializes in helping people launch cyber careers. Join us on this podcast as we explore what it means to be a cybersecurity professional and how to get started. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the Cyber Job Hacks Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff Colburn. Well, this week I want to address a question that I get. A lot of times people asking me, Jeff, how do I get started? What do I need to study? How do I study? Right? You're throwing a lot of terms out at me. You're telling me I need to know IPv6. I need to know automation. But, where do I get started? Right? So I get it, right? That if anyone new to the industry, it can become overwhelming, right? That there's a lot of stuff being thrown out, during these podcast episodes when I'm talking. And if you're new to the industry, it might sound like a foreign language. So I get it, right? So, this week I kind of want to address that question. So it's like, Jeff, one of the questions I get is like, Jeff, if you're going to start, how would you start? What would you study and how would you do it, right? So that's what I'm going to address this week. So I'm going to provide my own personal career roadmap. If I was going to start today, knowing what I know, right? I got 30 years in the industry. I've been around a little bit, working at the senior level, right? So I see things. I've seen things come. I've seen things go. I see where the market's going. I see where the industry's going, right? So this is kind of what I'm going to lay out today is that personal career roadmap. If I was like fresh, want to start in this industry, right? So, and this applies for somebody, you want to be a network engineer, network security engineer. To me, they go hand in hand. You can't be an effective network engineer if you don't know security, and you're going to be a train wreck of a network security engineer if you don't know networking. So if you want to be good at either one of them, then know them both, right? Doesn't mean you have to be an expert at both, but you got to have a level of knowledge. You got to have a foundational level of knowledge in both disciplines, both networking and network security, right? That's how you're going to be effective. Otherwise, network security engineer without any kind of networking experience, you're going to be breaking things. Network engineers without any kind of security, you're not going to know how to design a proper infrastructure because you're not going to know where to put the security controls, right? So you got to know both. So that's what I'm laying out today is kind of my take on if I was going into the industry today, this is what I would study, right? So like I said, I've been around for 30 years. I've learned and forgotten technologies over that time period, right? But I used to have to, know frame relay, right? Designing, wide area networks using frame relay. That's gone today, right? ISDN used to be deploying ISDN concentrators out there before we had cable modems. Gone. Nobody's really using ISDN today. ATM, right? We used to be deploying ATM in the campus, right? No, Fast Ethernet came out, killed that, right? No, there's no more, if there's ATM, I'm not seeing it, not at least what I'm doing. It's not where it used to be, right? So those are no longer used today. But there are two critical skills that I use today that I've been using since the 90s, and that's routing and switching, right? If you don't know how a switch builds its forwarding table and how it makes forwarding decisions, you're in trouble, right? That hasn't changed. That since the switch has been developed, even back when they were called bridges, right? That technology, that how it works remains the same, right? There's new features of how a switch builds its forwarding table and how it forwards Ethernet frames hasn't changed, right? That's a foundational knowledge that's critical. Same with routers, right? The way routers learn routes and forward IP packets hasn't changed, right? There's new technologies, but the basic principle of routing is the same, right? So these are what I call foundational, right? Knowledge or skill sets. That these are must-know technologies. If you're going to be in networking, network security, you got to know basic routing and switching. You can't get around it. But I tell you what, I can't tell you the number of people that I've interviewed who don't even know basic routing and switching. They can't tell me how a switch builds its forwarding table. They can't tell me, how a router actually routes. Right? They know the commands, show IP route, but if a route's missing, they don't even know where to look to figure out why a route's not showing up in the route table. So that's what you need to know, right? So if you're going to get into networking, you got to know routing and switching, right? So that's the what to know. So how to learn it, right? That's great, Jeff. You need to know routing and switching. Well, how do I learn it? Well, I always follow the structured approach, right? I've done this my entire career, right? I could sit there and just randomly read books, watch YouTube videos, but I need structure. If I'm going to move forward, I need to know what's important to learn and kind of have it laid out for me, right? So I always used certification exams to provide that structure, right? That exam blueprint, it lists the technologies, right? So I know for that level of engineer, these are the things I should know, and these are the things I need to study, right? So if I get certified and I pass that exam, it just demonstrates that I learned and mastered those technologies. Not that I'm an expert in that technology, but I have the level of knowledge expected for that certification, be it entry level, mid level, or expert level, right? And I mean really learning, what's on the exam blueprint, right? You could go out there and memorize these exam dumps that you download, but that's not the point of this. The certification is not just to get certified. It's always about the journey, right? It's always about the studying that gets you prepared to pass the exam. If you shortcut it, you're not building any knowledge. You're just memorizing answers. And guess what? When you go for that technical interview, you're gonna get found out, right? You're gonna crash and burn. You're gonna embarrass yourself. So don't do it, right? If you're serious about getting in this industry, then do the work, study, but use the exam blueprint to structure your study and know what you need to study. And then there's also certification guides and other things that kind of help you to kind of organize the information for you to study, right? So it's a good way to learn, especially if you're starting out. You get out, you get in the industry, you've been around a while, you're just going to kind of read things, you know where to find things. But if you're starting out, why make it difficult for yourself? Somebody's written a certification guide for you. So here's a good place to start, right? So for routing and switching, what would I do? Like, how would I learn basic routing and switching? Well, Cisco certification really has set the tier for engineering proficiency, right? So if you look at job postings, that'll say, this position requires a CCNA level engineer. More advanced position will say, this one requires a CCNP level engineer, right? So the industry is already thinking in terms of CCNA and CCNP, right? So where do you start? Well, you start with a Cisco CCNA exam, right? That's even if you go into an environment that doesn't have Cisco switches, people still respect the CCNA exam, right? They still know, this person knows basic routing and switching because they passed the CCNA exam, right? So that's where you would start, right? That's that foundational routing and switching knowledge, right? If you pass the CCNA exam legitimately, meaning you studied, you're going to know how a switch builds its forwarding table, how it makes forwarding decisions, and you're going to know how a router builds its routing tables, like where it learns routes and how it forwards IP packets, right? You're going to know that. Now, there's a couple other exams if you want to get your feet wet, right? Like Cisco has these new CCST exams. But for me, I would aim for CCNA, right? So like I've talked about, like if somebody asks me, what you would do, Jeff, if you're starting today, I wouldn't do the CCSTs. I would go right for the CCNA. That's just me. That's what my focus would be, because I know it's recognized, and it's going to make me dig deeper, right, to really learn routing and switching. Where CCST it's more of a technician level. This is kind of going to give me that little bit more of an edge on routing and switching. But I wouldn't stop there, right? That would be my first thing, right? Is building routing and switching, right? So like just think like in school, right? You study many subjects at the same time, right? I'm studying math, I'm studying English, I'm studying biology. Like I'm studying all these things at the same time. Yeah, for some reason in the industry, people will get stuck on studying a single technology or a single certification. What I would do is I would go multi-track, right? That means I'm going to be studying different things at the same time. I'm not just going to like knock out one and then move on to the next thing, right? I would do like I did in school. I would be studying multiple things at the same time. I call this multi-track. In this case, it's going to be a 3-track study program that I would follow. And that's just going to make me that stronger entry-level candidate, because I'm not just know one technology. I know complementary technologies that go together. All right, so CCNA would provide that route switch foundation for me, but I do need to know security, right? So if I'm entry level, I want to know networking, but I also know I need to know a little bit about security. Well, these days, the most recognized entry level security certification is the CompTIA Security Plus, right? That's going to provide you like that foundational knowledge in cybersecurity, and you don't need to know basic routing and switching to start studying Security Plus, right? It's going to start teaching you just about the basics of cybersecurity. So you don't need to know the route switch yet. So you can start studying Security Plus the same time you're studying for CCNA, and that's what I would do, right? And because it's Security Plus, if a lot of jobs require it, right? So especially the U.S. government, if you want to do anything cybersecurity related, you're going to have to know. You're going to have Security Plus certifications, right? So that would be my second track, right? I have CCNA and then Security Plus. Then I would add a third track, right? So I've mentioned several times before in previous episodes, automation. There's nothing stopping you from learning or starting to learn Linux, Python, and Ansible, right? You don't need to know routing and switching to start learning Linux, start learning Python, start learning Ansible. So that would be my third track, right? Network automation, right? And there's again, I would use certification exam to structure my study, right? Because if I'm going in new, I don't know how to study Linux. I don't know how to study Python. I don't know what's important to know about Ansible. But if I follow a certification blueprint, it's going to help me. Now, there's specific certs for each one of them, but I would go with a cert that kind of touches on all three and specifically focuses on network automation, right? Because Linux, Python, Ansible, I can use that for systems automation as well, cloud automation. So I want something that's specifically focused on network automation. So me personally, I would go with the Cisco DevNet Associate exam, right? So that would be my blueprint for my third track, my network automation track. So I know that sounds like a lot, right? And it is, believe me, that's a lot to know, right? But if you seriously want to get into this industry and you know, hey, I want to be in network engineering, network security engineering, then this is going to build that solid foundation. And you got to give yourself time, right? This is not like, hey, I'm going to knock this out in a couple months. I would give myself a 12-month runway, right? And that's that. I'm not trying to shortcut anything. I want to make sure I'm taking the time to really know these technologies in these three disciplines, right? So it's not going to be easy, but who said it was going to be easy, right? I never tell any of my students it's going to be easy. I tell them it can be done, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a lot of hard work, to be honest. You got to dedicate real time. Like, I'll give you an example. When I was studying for my Cisco CCIE exam, I was already a senior level network engineer, but it still took me 7 months. I studied every night after work and every weekend, right? That's all I did is I studied for CCIE exam, but it paid off, right? Because I have that certification, and it grew my career. That not only did the journey of getting there make me a better engineer, but also opened more senior level opportunities for me, right? So it paid off, right? But it was a sacrifice of time, right? I had to give up real time to get there. And that's what you're going to have to do. If you want this, you really want this, it's what you're going to have to do. Same as when I was preparing for my dissertation, right? When I was getting my PhD, I would take vacation days, right? I'd take vacation from work. I'd take a whole week off just to do research, right? It was a sacrifice, right? It would have been nice to go away for a week somewhere and take time off, but no, I wanted this. I knew it was going to take hard work. I knew it was going to take time. So I would burn vacation to do it. And it paid off because I got it done, right? So, you don't have to do all this. Like I said, I've had students get in with just a CCNA. They do it. They continue to do it. It's not easy. They go through a lot of interviews because, you have a certification, but you don't have any experience yet. So you kind of have to wait for that opportunity to pop up where somebody's going to give you a chance. And yes, having a CCNA over not having one is definitely going to help you, but it's not the golden ticket, right? And I tell my students up front, it can be done, but it's not going to be easy. And I remind them, because even after they get certified and they're getting frustrated because they're on their 4th, 5th, 6th interview, and they're not getting any callbacks, I had to remind them it's not easy. I know one student, and he's a network architect today. He's one of my earliest students, but he had to submit his resume 100 times. He submitted his resume for 100 jobs, and he had to go through several interviews. But he finally got that entry level position as a network technician. He worked in a network operations center, but now today, he's I think 10, 12 years in now, and he's a network architect. He's doing quite well, but it wasn't easy. It took a lot of hard work. So what else would I do? Well, a lab, right? Head knowledge isn't going to cut it. Yeah, and you can memorize all this stuff, but you're no use to anybody if you can't actually put it to use. Like if you can't go in and configure something, nobody's going to want you, right? So a lab is critical. You have to have a lab. Either you build a lab or you have access to a lab, right? There's virtual labs out there. In season 1, episode 14, I explained how to build a very inexpensive lab. All it costs you is the hardware. The network operating system's free. The tools are free. So if you want to follow that, it uses Container Lab. Just go back and listen to that episode. But a lab is a must. You got to spend time in a lab. So when you come up with your study plan, it can't just be reading and rereading. It has to be actually doing labs to reinforce what you learn and give you some experience, right? You're going to want a command line interface, right? It doesn't stop there, right? You got to know how to automate, right? That's where the industry is going. But knowing the command line interface is still a critical or foundational skill, because you still need to be able to go into something and navigate using the command line. But you don't stop there, right? Once you want to start building that automation, right? You want to start learning how to automate network configuration. So you want to practice that in your lab, right? And that's what's going to make you stand apart, right? Because you're going to be going up against people, they're already in the industry and they don't know how to automate because they never bothered to learn, right? They just purely command line. And you're going to have that edge because you know how to automate. So instead of going to 100 routers or switches that, going to each individual one, you can just go out there and deploy that change across all 100 with executing, just one script. And people are going to want that because they don't want this person burning up multiple change windows, trying to have to go to each individual router and switch when you can just knock it out in 15 minutes using a script. So you got to, use that lab and use it wisely. Just don't sit there and just memorize command line or how to build things through command line. Start using those automation tools, Python scripts, Ansible. That's what you're going to want in your lab. Those are the things you want to play with. So there you have it. That right. So if I was trying to break into the industry today, this would be my 3-track study plan: CCNA, Security Plus, and then the DevNet Associate, right? networking, security, automation. Those would be the three. I would be going into an entry-level interview and going up against people that might know, so like might have a Network Plus or an A Plus certification. Maybe they have their CCNA, and then here I come, CCNA, Security Plus, DevNet Associate. I know how to automate. I know routing and switching, and I know some basics on how to secure it. I know what the threats are. I know the mitigations for it, and that's going to make me stand out from everybody else. But I wouldn't stop, right? And here's the thing that a lot of people do, including my students, is they get certified, but they stop studying once they start the job hunting and the interview process. No, you got to keep going, keep studying, right? Because you got to keep learning. Because the other thing is you stop studying and you're not working in the industry yet. You start forgetting the things that you know, right? So you want to keep building on that foundation, especially if you spent 12 months, if you use my 12-month runway and all of a sudden you stop, then you're going to start forgetting things, right? And you're not going to be fresh for those technical interviews. So for networking, right, I would continue this 3-track study plan. So networking, CCNP Enterprise Core exam. I'd start studying. Don't necessarily need to be past the exam yet, but I start studying it while I'm going through that whole interview process because, again, this is going to take, it's going to improve the knowledge I already have, plus it's going to add additional knowledge, right? It's going to start introducing me to more advanced concepts in routing and switching. For security, I'd probably start looking at Palo Alto, right? Because Palo Alto, they're a leader in the security space. More often than not, you're going to run into Palo Alto firewalls out there and other security appliances. So I start looking at their entry-level exam, right? Start studying that. Again, don't necessarily have to get certified, right? Just want to be studying it while I'm going through that job hunt and interviewing process. And then for automation, right, I'd probably just move right into the DevNet professional, right? Because that would just start building on what I learned through the associate, just, again, focusing on the whole automation, Ansible. But that's what I would do. But what else would I do, right? I'd probably start looking at some concentrations during my 12-month study as well, right? I know IPv6 is huge, right? It's getting more and more organizations are having to move to IPv6 only. So I would start becoming strong in IPv6. Yeah, it's on a CCNA exam, but I'd probably want to develop a deeper knowledge on that. So I'd probably start, studying things outside the CCNA track, specifically on IPv6 and how to migrate from IPv4. For automation, I'd probably start developing my own network automation scripts, right, and making them available on GitHub. Doesn't have to be anything sophisticated, but, just some basic network automation scripts that you developed, you put on GitHub. So when you're interviewing, their GitHub is publicly accessible. People can look at it and say, oh, yeah, he's done some network automation scripts. He knows what he's doing. It could just be like a simple change you're making on a router, but you developed a Python script for it. And now you have it to show potential employers, right? And the other thing is I would get familiar with the various zero trust frameworks, right, and the technology available. Again, just kind of adding some color to my foundational skills, things that are becoming more and more relevant today, right? Things that are becoming more in demand. Just again to help me stand out from the competition if I'm trying to break in. So, like I said, it's a lot to know. You don't have to do any of this. You don't have to do all of this. You could, like I said, you can still get into IT just doing part of it. But the question was, what would I do? And this is what I would do, right? And this is what I would recommend to anyone who say, hey, Jeff, I want to get into network engineering. I want to become a network security engineer. What should I do? This is what I would recommend. Now, they say, hey, Jeff, I don't want to do all that. Then I can back it off from that. But if you want my honest answer, I just gave it to you. I just laid it out in this episode. So, if there's something you want to explore further, if you say, you know what, Jeff, this sounds great, but I would like to know more about it, then you can set up some time and talk with me, right? You can schedule time, spend 45 minutes talking with me. You can schedule the link in our show notes. Hey, if you say this, I'm definitely in, I want to get started, but I need help. Or, hey, Jeff, I'd love to have an instructor or a coach to get me through one or all three of these training tracks. I've done it. I've instructed and helped people for over 12 years. That's what I do. I try to help people break into the industry that don't normally have avenues in. Reach out to me if you want just further direction. I recommend just set up and we can kind of talk you through where you're at and where you're trying to get to, and lay out a plan for you. So this was my career roadmap. If I'm starting today, I hope you found this useful. Until next time, have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Cyber Job Hacks Podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, please share with a friend who may be interested in becoming a cyber professional. Also, please leave a review on Apple Podcast. Your feedback is greatly appreciated, as it will shape our future episodes. Meet us here every Monday as we discuss the cyber job market and how to launch your career. Until next time, have a great week.